Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire. Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Mike. Happy birthday.
Thank you. I'm 39.
This is your last year in your 30s. Enjoy
Yeah, I
it.
know. What was it like when you were in your 30s?
I honestly,
It's been a while.
I can barely remember. It was a full year and a half ago. So a lot's changed. There was no global pandemic when I was in my 30s. The world has really become a different place.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing I'd rather be doing on my birthday other than maybe playing video games and eating cake, which I will also do today, other than recording this episode with you.
Yeah. I mean, this is basically my birthday present to you. We're talking about, retirement and 401ks and 403bs and compound interest.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. And I was on time. That's
yes,
exciting.
You were. That in and of itself is a surprise. I'm not sure I'm deserving of, but thank you.
I was like, today's your birthday. I'm going to I'm not going to waste your time. I can do that for you one day a year, Mike. One day a year.
Thank you. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about some things that we've discussed in the past. We're going to group them together into a slightly different topic. This focus of today's episode is the one thing you need to do to plan for a traditional retirement, not a FIRE retirement, not any sort of major lifestyle change. Like, what do you need to do to ensure that you could stop working at age 60 or 65?
And we'll share one thing, and then we'll share a bunch of other kind of caveats and details around it. But there really is only one thing you need to do. And Mike, I don't know that we need to build it up for an entire episode. It's not like we're going to share it at the end.
Yeah, it's not a secret. You need to save a lot of money, and you need to do it early in your life, and you need to do it consistently.
Yeah. The earlier, the better. And I think that's one of the themes today. So don't get discouraged if you're old like Mike and you're 39 and just a little birthday joke. Just kidding. 39 is not old, by the way. But don't get discouraged. We're going to talk about some things that it would be ideal if you do in your early 20s. But if you haven't and you're 39, to use an example, it is not too late. It just the sooner the better. So our encouragement and kind of rally cry to everyone today is to invest as much as you can as early as possible, but don't get defeated if you feel like you've missed the boat on quote early, because the best time to start investing, when is it, Mike?
Right now.
Right now. Good answer.
And I hear from a lot of people who say that they are not maxing out their accounts or not even started saving for retirement because they don't earn enough. And one of the things we'd like for you guys to take away from this episode is that is the furthest thing from the truth that you can imagine. You should never wait for the opportunity where you're ready to start saving money. Like, you need to work that into your life now. And the numbers we're going to share in this episode, I hope, will reinforce why you should be saving right now, even if it's not a lot of money.
Yeah, and we'll give some examples later, but just on your point, Mike, about people saying they don't earn enough. Yes, there are some people who literally can barely, pay for basic utilities and put food on the table and truly could argue they don't earn enough. But many people who say they can't afford to do that, because I've seen people like that in my workspace say that, they're choosing to prioritize other things. They're choosing to have a nicer car, to have a nicer place they live in, to have, they have fancy clothes and they go out for expensive dinners. And so these are trade-offs. And what we're suggesting, and we're going to give you some numbers to hopefully bring this to life and motivate and encourage you. But what we're suggesting is you got to make some trade-offs earlier in life, the earlier, the better, to invest some larger amounts of money into your retirement accounts. And then the compound interest will just do its magic. Right. And so even if you want to pull it back eventually and say, oh, once I have kids, it's going to be harder to invest as much. That's great. invest a ton before you have kids and then pull it back, right? Don't do what I did. I invested smaller amounts when I was younger. And then as I got older, I realized the benefit and started, maxing it out. But I didn't start maxing it out until, gosh, Mike, when I met you. So what was that?
When you were my age, 39.
But I was in my late 30s. I was like 37 or 38, maybe, when I started maxing it out.
We have not known each other that long.
Wait, when did we meet? How do I not know our anniversary?
2019.
Is it real? Did you really? That's when you started at the company?
I started in December of 2018.
Okay, so we met late, but we really, when we, blossomed over our financial discussions was in 2019. Okay. Wow. That's crazy. This, I feel like I've known you longer. Well, anyways, point is, yes, I've only started maxing out really for like 2 or 3 years then. And so, and again, that's not bad. I don't want to imply that that's bad, but if I could go back and do it differently, and I've run some simulations for this discussion today, and even think about where I would be if I had maxed it out in my 20s, when I would have been one of those people who said, I can't afford it. But I remember my first job, I made $46,500. And if I wanted to make some trade-offs in my lifestyle, I could have afforded it.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I didn't know any better. I didn't realize the value or the importance of it. And I bought a brand new Honda Accord when I got that job because I thought I was hot shit. I was like $47,000. And then I realized what taxes, like the volume of taxes that get taken out. I was shocked anyways, getting off topic.
Yeah. What are we talking about?
We're talking about 401ks, 403bs. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about 401ks, but it's really not about 401ks. It's really about just compound interest and saving in general. But 401ks are so ubiquitous. And if you work for any size company, really, it is almost certain that you're going to have access to 401k or 403b. And so it's a good way to introduce you guys to this concept. So let's give some refreshers on how these accounts work.
Hey, Mike, one thing I was going to mention too is you were mentioning companies because we work for companies, but you can also have a 401k as an entrepreneur. So we're not as well versed in that space, but it is a thing. And it's when I don't work for a big company, I will still contribute to a 401k, but I will do it in a different way. And I'll learn how all that works, which I don't know yet, but I know they exist.
So let's do a quick refresher. There are basically 2 types of retirement accounts. There's IRAs and there's Roth IRAs, IRAs being individual retirement accounts. And there's a bunch of different kinds. And so we're not going to get into it. We've done an episode about this. They differ in one major way. A 401k or a 403b, you put your money in pre-tax. So you earn it, you don't give taxes to the government in withholdings, and then it grows in what's called a tax-deferred status. And then when you withdraw it in retirement, then you pay taxes on it. The other type of Roth is post-tax. So you earn your income, you pay the government your taxes, then you are allowed to make a contribution to this account, and then that contribution grows, and when you withdraw it, it's tax-free. A health savings account is similar to this. Now, for simplicity of this episode, we're not going to focus on the tax implications of making a certain type of contribution when. The purpose is to really talk about compound interest and how these numbers grow over time. But it's important just to refresh you guys on how the accounts work.
And so, Mike, to bring this to life for all of our listeners, we ran some different scenarios, and we just created you can do this on a lot of calculators online, but we just created a really simple spreadsheet. And I knew just roughly in my head, I was like, I know if you just invest a lot up front, you'll have so much more. And then even like quit investing, you'll have so much more when you're 65 as an example. I didn't really know the full numbers. I just wanted to like play around with, what I generally knew. And I was even like shocked by some of the outputs of playing around with these scenarios. So we're just going to kind of walk through these scenarios. And I know it's a little bit tougher when you're listening. So we'll try to be as clear as possible.
Now, one big caveat is that we have made some simplifying assumptions in all of these. So we are assuming that you earn 7% in the stock market, which is a historical rate of return, but that is when the stock market goes up 20% and then down 10%, and it's volatile every year. So there really isn't a real life scenario where you earn a consistent 7% a year, but just for the sake of examples, we're going to assume that's the case.
Yeah, this is very directional. And the other assumption here is we don't know what anyone's employer matches are or what your salary is or any of that. And so we're not including the employer match, which is just going to be icing on the cake for this, right? So it's going to be even better than, and in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars better than what I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm. All right. Hit us with some examples, man.
Okay. So this is one of my favorite. And in most of these examples, we're giving totals of investing about $100,000 over some period of time, just so that they're apples to apples. And that's not a lot of money. Most people will put way more than that into their retirement accounts. So if you max out your 401k for 5 years when you are 25 years old, so from 25 to 30, you do the annual max, which next year is going to be $20,500. It's exciting, by the way. They upped it by 1,000. Yeah, big deal. Okay, you do that, which is going to be about a little bit more than $100,000, and you never put anything in it again. You just you max it out for those 5 years, you suck it up, and then you quit, which we don't recommend anyone do. We're just giving this as a scenario. At 65, you will have 1.35 million. So your $100,000 investment turned into 1.35 million.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's one example. This is the example of, let's compare this to the others. This is the example of a high amount early in your life that then has, 30 plus years to grow and to build compound interest. So the second example is if you put in $5,000 a year for 20 years, starting at 25, again, age 25 to 45, and then you never put anything again. And again, that's about $100,000. That's actually almost identical to the previous one. So about $100,000 that you're putting in. Then at age 65, you will only, still a lot of money, but you will only have $848,000. So you're that similar $100,000 investment, but spread out over 20 years instead of jammed into 5 years earlier in your life. Now turns into $848,000, but that's almost $500,000 less than if you had just invested the exact same amount of money earlier in life, right? And so again, that those two examples are, and look, there's inflation, there's all sorts of other things that you could put in that. We're being, directionally simple here just to get the point across.
Now, let me illustrate that example a little bit further. So if you were to make a $5,000 contribution at age 64, right before you retire, you would only have 7% more than that. Now, if you were to make a $5,000 contribution at age 25 and give yourself 40 years for that to grow, that would be worth $75,000. And so there is an important element of opportunity cost here, where you might think that $1,000 or $100 is not that much money. But if you are young and you are trading off saving this versus spending it, this isn't going to be worth a little bit more. This is going to be worth tens of thousands of dollars more. Every single purchase decision you make has a big opportunity cost in the future.
Yeah. So I remember the first car I bought, I think it was around close to $20,000. And that is an example of, I could have kept the car I already had. It still would have made it a few more years, or I could have bought a $10,000 car and put $10,000 into my 401k that year. And I don't know that math off the top of my head, but it's probably close to double of what you just said.
So $10,000 over 40 years at 7%.
I was 21. I was 21 at the time.
Okay, so 44 years. We're talking about age 65, right?
Well, do 41. So I was 21. So 20 years later, what would that be sitting in my account right now if I had put in 10?
Okay, $10,000 over 20 years at 7% is $39,000, which is enough to have bought your Subaru.
It is. It is. That doesn't sound like enough. Are you sure?
$10,000 over 20 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just checking. Okay. It's quadrupled.
I mean,
you can take out the point 7%, of me saying.
I mean, if you had made it 15%, you'd have 164. Maybe I'm just,
wait, what is the math if I had left it in there till 65?
All right. At my 7% for 44 years, 196,000.
Right. So I have to think back. Did I enjoy did I enjoy that brand new Honda Accord enough? Would I have been just as happy and, functioning in my life to have a used car of some sort for half the value, to know that when I retire, I could have another $200,000, right? And look, some people might answer that question differently. That's why it's personal finance. We're putting out the options for you to consider.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's continue with some of these retirement scenarios now. So we did we compared the same investments. If you had done it early in life, maxed it out, for 5 years early versus spread it out over 20 years, is a $500,000, $500,000 difference at retirement, which is really large, right? That's more than some people have in their accounts completely at retirement age. So here's another scenario. If you spread it over 40 years, so let's take that $100,000 and we're going to put in $2,500 a year. So an even smaller amount, but we're going to spread it out over 40 years from age 25 to 65. Then you would have $534,000 at age 65. That is almost $1 million less than if you had put in the same amount of money earlier on, right? The very first scenario we shared. And so again, we're kind of working our way down just to show those examples. And then I'll share a last example that is more similar, a little bit different because I did it younger, but more similar to kind of what I've done, and was using my example earlier to say I put in smaller amounts when I was younger. I usually did like match the company match always, and then started maxing it out when I got older. So here's our last example. If you put in $2,500 a year for 25 years, so from age 25 to 50, and then at age 50, maybe when your kids have gone to college or whatever, you decide you can now finally start maxing it out, and you max it out $20K a year for 15 years, which is a long time. At age 65, you would still only have $1 million.
Wow.
That to me is crazy, right? Like you're comparing sort of the very first scenario to that scenario. And now in this scenario, my other three scenarios, you were putting in $100,000 over time. In this scenario, you're putting in $362,000 over time, but you still have less than if you had just put in $100,000 in your first 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. And I get it. Not everybody could afford to put in $20,500 a year, but there are plenty of people coming out of college that do have higher paying jobs and could afford to live on, let's say they make $50,000. They could afford to live on $30,000 a year, and they could put $20,000 towards their 401k. There are lots of people, especially in your 20s. And look, we started this at 25. I started working when I was 21 at a corporate job. I was an age younger, whatever, doesn't matter. But there's a lot of people that start working at like 21, 22, 23. So, this is going to be even higher in those scenarios. This is just, I hope these examples reinforce the point we made at the very beginning, which is the earlier you do this, the better. And so when we say, the kind of clickbait title of the one thing you need to do to plan for traditional retirement, it's to save right now. The earlier, the better.
And one thing that I can almost guarantee you is that if you are in the mindset right now that you can't save, or you can't save as much to max these accounts out, you will almost certainly think differently in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. It is just so unlikely that you will get towards retirement age or towards the end of your life and think back and be like, you know what? I'm glad I didn't save that extra $500 a month, because you know what? I don't need an extra $10 million right now. When you look back over such a long period of time, these decisions will seem so easy to you. And so don't put them off. Just start saving as much as you can.
I think that's a great point, Mike, because I've been using this example of the Honda Accord that I bought coming right out of college, that I felt like I could buy because I'd gotten this job that was paying me what I thought was a crazy amount of money at the time. But when I look back on life and I think about my happy moments, my regrets, having just everything, like having children, which by the way, that is a happy moment, not a regret. But just everything in my life, my memories, I don't have memories of that car, right? I have memories of the people in my life. I have memories of my dad who's no longer here. I have, I wish I had taken more trips with my dad in his older age before he died. Just, all these things that I have memories of, and they're not some expensive thing or some fancy apartment I lived in, or, you know what I mean? And so I do think it's easier to say at our age. You remember when we interviewed Mark Horstman early on?
Yep.
He is older than us. And he kind of made this point at one point about like, every year you're older, you have like more and more wisdom. You might have thought you knew it all when you were, 25 or 30, but like you didn't. And the older you get, the more you realize and know and can appreciate that. So take some advice from some, potentially we may be older than people listening, and I'm sure we're younger than people listening. Mike is now 39. So but yeah, he's got a lot of wisdom.
And Maggie, I'll share another story. And that was very eloquently said about what you look back on in your life and remember. But when I think back to when I first became eligible for a deferred compensation program when I was at AT&T, and some of my friends who were of similar age and had just been promoted, we were all talking about this. And I was, when I became eligible, maxing it out. At that time, we could contribute up to 55% of our salary. And everybody else was very hesitant. They're like, well, I hear what you're saying. I've seen your model. I need to work my way into it. And so they would contribute 5% or 10%. And then over time, they would be like, you know what? I think you're right. I'm going to contribute a little bit more. I'm still not ready to do 55%, but I'm going to do a little bit more. And fast forward to today, every single one of them is saying, what was I so worried about? Of course I was able to survive without this income. I made it work. Why didn't I can see the benefit of this program. Why did I not max this out sooner?
Yeah.
And I think everybody will get to that point where once your returns in the market start to snowball and it becomes a material amount of money, you will look back on the earlier decisions and really wish that you had made some more drastic changes, because it will pay off so dramatically in the future.
Yeah. And I think about people who may be younger and know they want to have kids someday. Think about it in that way, right? Like making these decisions and trade-offs younger in your life will afford you time with your kids, right? Like I think about, if I just, there's the time with your kids, right? It's these fleeting moments. They grow up very quickly and they want and value and need time with you. And having a better financial situation puts you in a better position to be able to make the decisions to be able to spend more time with your kids. Okay, so let's share just a couple like trade-offs, right? So we were kind of talking about some of these trade-offs you could make earlier in life. Think about like why we already gave the car example, but also like think about how you can control your housing expenses. So we did an episode where we interviewed Andrew Kerr on house hacking, which we'll put in the show notes. That's a great one to listen to if you want some inspiration on that topic. But people think they have to buy a house. I bought a house really young because I was just like, I don't know, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. Consider having a roommate. Consider other forms of house hacking. I live with your parents for a year.
Your
There's
parents
no shame
will love
in that. They might. I don't know. Sometimes, usually, I don't know. It's a mix. But if you can, and that's a convenient situation, and you're single or whatever, it just works for you. There's no shame in stuff like that, especially if you're doing something like that to max out your 401k. Right? Your parents will be proud of you probably for doing that. Not that you just like aren't getting a job and are kind of, sitting on their couch playing video games all day, or the bad ends of that.
We talked about cars. We talked about housing. Let's not forget the little things though. So everybody, you always hear the example of like, if you were to skip your latte at Starbucks every single day. By the way, Maggie is drinking a drink from Starbucks right now.
No, I'm not. This is my reusable Starbucks cup that I've owned for 10 years, and it has my homemade smoothie in it.
Oh, okay, good.
It's just like an insulated
nice work,
cup. Yeah.
So
no, I don't go to Starbucks.
Even though it's sort of a common example, that makes a big difference. Like $3 a day, $5 a day, this sort of stuff adds up. It becomes hundreds of dollars a month. And so don't skip the little expenses that you can control. You should be focusing on the big ones, but every little dollar adds up eventually.
Yeah, that's very true. So since we're talking about retirement accounts, we'll share just a few other tips while we're on this topic if it's something you're thinking about. One is make sure your 401k is actually invested in something. Most people's companies, I think when you kind of go through the process, like they make you choose something.
Yeah.
But not all do. And so I have heard some crazy stories. Most of these are online. I don't even know if they're true, but where people had been putting money in their 401k and didn't realize that it was just sitting in cash. And this can happen with your, and this actually happened with my HSA also. I didn't realize for like a year that it was just sitting in cash and that I had to choose the investment fund. And so make sure that it actually is invested in something. And if you're not sure, if you're confused, like most of the companies that your 401k is with, like through your company or 403b, whatever it is, they have customer service. Like call somebody, use the chat on their website, right? Just ask. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Like ask them what it's invested in, or you can, you'll toggle and it's pretty clear kind of how you choose your investments in a lot of the sites. The other one is make sure that you are maximizing your employer match. I mean, we've talked about this before on our 401k episodes, but that is free money. So just to use our employer as an example, they match the first 6%. If I'm not putting in at least 6% of my salary, I am literally giving money away, right? I'm leaving money on the table that my company would give me for free. And so make sure that we're challenging you to get as close to the government maximum, which is $20,500 in 2022 in the US. We're challenging people to get as close to that as possible. We think that's really important. But if that's not where you're at least be taking your employer match. That is just a huge thing to make sure of.
And when you pick your investments in these accounts, the younger you are, the more comfortable you should be investing aggressively. Now, the term aggressive is all relative because in these accounts, they're not going to let you buy Bitcoin or NFTs or something super speculative. You're going to have like 10 options. And by aggressive, we mean large cap stocks in the US, so like Apple, Facebook, and Google, and that sort of stuff. That's large cap. That's considered aggressive. It's more aggressive than bonds compared to target date funds, which have a mix of aggressive investments within them. And so if you're young, you should feel a little more comfortable just buying into US stocks because it doesn't matter if it's high now or volatile now. You have 40 years for this to grow. That is so much time. You won't even notice this little blip if something drops in the short term.
Yeah, Mike, one of the recommendations you made to me when we first met was changing the investment that my 401k was in. I think I was in a target date fund. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what I was in, but it was not what you recommended. And you recommended I move to a large cap fund, like all of my 401k to a large, that's what it's called, right? A large cap fund?
Yeah.
It's basically large companies. Is that the fair way to describe it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not even sure.
Large market cap.
Large market cap. My performance over the past couple of years, I mean, obviously like the stock market has performed very well in the past couple of years also. I was getting a very moderate amount of returns prior to that, just because I was in a less aggressive fund. So, I mean, I'm a big proponent now and I'm very sold and often recommend the same thing to people. And like you said, I'm not even, as young as someone in their 20s and 30s, but I still have 20 plus years till I'm able to access that money. So that's a long time. And there's, a lot of historical performance trends in the market that make me feel very comfortable with a more aggressive performance on money that I don't need to get to for 20 years.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I think I've said many times I owe you a lunch at Ginya for that.
I am still waiting for this lunch.
If we weren't in a pandemic, everything's just a little, we don't go to work anymore. We work in our basements. It's tough. It's tough. Soon, we'll do it soon.
All right. So I hope this was helpful. Again, we've been talking about 401ks, but this isn't necessarily about 401ks. It is really about savings. The most prominent solution, the most widely available solution is going to be a 401k or a 403b. So you should use that to your advantage. So let's do our top 3 takeaways, Maggie.
Number 1, you can easily reach a traditional retirement with your 401k or 403b, and you can save even more if you max it out.
Number 2, your purchase decisions now impact you many times greater in the future because of compound growth.
Number 3, it takes time to build momentum, but trust us, saving now is the most important thing you can do. And I think I'm bad at these takeaways, like I got to add more to them, but I'm just going to double click on that point, right? We talked about those, the car reference and other things, right? It might feel like you're sacrificing something at the time, but I guarantee you 10 years later, you're not going to look back and think like, oh my gosh, I bought a used car for $10,000 instead of a brand new car for $20,000. What was I thinking?
I totally agree with you, Maggie.
People regret a lot of things, but those are not the types of things people tend to look back and regret.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have any thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram. And if you want to wish Mike a very special happy birthday when you're listening to this, you can also, he already mentioned it, but like, we really appreciate you leaving written reviews for us you have to do it in the Apple Podcast app and leave an actual written review. It just really helps us and other people find our podcast. And it's a great way to wish Mike a happy birthday.
It would make me feel really good.
Thank you. Bye, Mike. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Maggie. Bye.
Enjoy your video games and cake.
I will.